Good day, everybody. I'm Kathleen Angeles, and I'm here to report the summary of Module 2, Communication for Development. To recap, let's look back at the objectives for this module. So first, we are expected to be able to discuss the different communication models and the domains in communication for development. We are also expected to be able to discuss and differentiate the theory and practice associated with traditional development communication approach and the communication for development as practiced by international organizations. Diane reported on the unilinear models where communication is seen as having a beginning and an ending. Ruth reported on the transactional models where communication is seen as a two-way, cyclical, and processual process. She also discussed the systems model, where communication is seen as a system made up of parts that interact, interrelate, and interdepend towards the system's one or set of goals, all occurring simultaneously. My group mates also discussed about the approaches and domains and in communication for development. As you'll probably notice from the different approaches and domains that they have discussed, the similarities would be first they all are for social impact. So they are designed, they aim to address social issues and promote societal transformation one way or another. They work directly with communities or stakeholders to identify needs, mobilize resources, and implement initiatives. Strategic communication, another similarity that they have is the strategic communication or the strategic planning and targeted messaging to achieve specific goals and objectives. They also consider the audience or target groups or needs, preference, and characteristics in their communication effort. And lastly, they are participatory in nature. They emphasize on the importance of involving stakeholders or community members in decision making. Of course, definitely they would have different focus or objective depending on the domain or the approach that is being used, whether it's technology transfer in agriculture, like in the CTTA, diffusion of technology, communication for education or EDCOM. All of these, they have different focus and objectives. They also differ in their target audience. For the scope, they have, some of them have broader scope, like development communication, which encompasses various communication activities. There are also others which focus are on specific areas. They also differ in methods and techniques. And finally, they differ in implementation process. They may follow a distinct process or framework for implementation, and they may involve different steps or stages depending on the approach. So now, let me briefly discuss the four different C4D approaches that was written, that was included in our study guide. So first, we have the communication for development, or the C4D, by amplifying voices, which emphasizes on communication that is made out of collaboration with communities rather than delivering centralized messages towards desired behavior change. If we use this approach, the messages are created by the people in the community. So they involve amplifying local voices to ensure that those who are affected by change are included and integrated to in the developmental process. So we use the community-centered media approach. So this involves communities in planning media strategies, creating content, leading to significant transformation. So they include initiating projects with local champions. Maybe they look for a community leader, somebody who is in the locality that they can initiate the project with, and then eventually they train the community members so that they'll be able to use the media equipments, and create and fulfill the media tasks, so that there is a community participation in media production. So one key feature of this approach is that they look for sponsors to provide the technology, the equipment, and the financial resources. They also provide the training and the coaching. And then once the community members, through the champion, the local champion, uh, once they are equipped with both knowledge and materials, they prepare the community-centered media. Now, another model, another C4D approach that was included in our reading list was the one prepared by the One World Network, which is a consultancy report. Their tagline is "People at the Center of Local and Global Development Communication Loop." So this is a people-centered way of communicating development that advocates for people's personal growth, viewpoints, aspiration, and ultimately aiming for individuals to express themselves directly, sharing their own experiences and opinions, ensuring they have a platform to be listened and acknowledged. So this is a little bit different also compared to the first one, the one used by the amplifying voices, because this one, the aim is to amplify the voice of the grassroots. So it's not really training them so that they will be, so it's not really training them, but giving them platform. So the communicators for this approach are the individuals who are not typically represented in mainstream communication networks, or as they call dominant communicator nodes. C4D in this approach is given to those whose voice are um, not yet that heard. For example, grassroots, marginalized, or isolated individuals. So they are the ones who create their message, and they use materials that are also the materials or tools, communication tools, which they are already comfortable in using. So unlike the first one, which wherein they are being trained to be able to use modern technologies, modern equipments, to be able to adopt foreign or not tools that are not yet amongst what they are comfortable in using. This C4D approach by the One World Network uh, you utilize old and new technologies. Again, ones that they are already comfortable in using, the ones that are available to them, accessible to them, and are that are at par with their abilities and needs. So another they may use ICTs. They may increasingly use ICTs because, as we know, ICTs enable these individuals to be able to reach more people or the target audience that they want, which they may not be able to easily reach if they use just the traditional media. So, speaking of which, the target audience, unlike the target audience in this approach, are the dominant communicator nodes. So we can see, or maybe it's safe to say that the model that they use is bottom up or peripheral to the center. From those who are in the laylayan, those who are in the margin, the marginalized, the isolated ones, towards those who are dominant in terms of communication. Communication process for this approach, they feature three key elements: the access or knowledge in this part, the speech, or here in the diagram, the voice, and networking or communication, which is here. The third one is the C4D as practiced by the UNDP. So, one key feature of this approach is that it emphasizes dialogue and community participation. Also draw upon expanded definitions by various actors that highlight the role of C4D in fostering change through dialogue, trust building, knowledge sharing, and policy making. So it prioritizes participation of disadvantaged individuals in shaping decision affecting their lives. So the key feature of this is the C4D participation in human development, where they include inclusive national planning, which involves all segments of society. So not only the marginalized or the isolated, but everybody, all kinds of stakeholders in society. It also it is believed in this approach that the broader the participation, the more diverse voices are heard, then there will be more responsive governance and sustainable development. It also features access to clear and reliable information, which is seen as essential, for informed decision making and policy influence. It's ICT. Now ICT, unlike this one here, they see that while ICT can offer opportunities for public participation for wider reach of message, it can also widen the digital divide because, as we know, not everyone has access to ICTs. And then C4D in this approach aims to empower communities and hold policymakers accountable, utilizing appropriate actions, including ICT intervention. So I picture this approach as being mediated by development workers. Maybe it's a bit similar to the first one that we talked about, the one by amplifying voices. But in this case, this is more of, I think the range is much wider compared to the first one, which is community based. They focus on human rights based approach to development, wherein they prioritize equity and empowerment, and they also emphasize the right to. There will always be a continuous right to access information and freedom of expression. They highlight the role of citizens as rights holders and government as duty bearers. C4D in this approach is integral to addressing poverty, governance, and gender issues in development intervention. And lastly, the fourth approach that was included in the reading is the IMCFSS, or the Integrated Model of Communication for Social Change by Figueroa et al. This is rooted in Paulo Freire's philosophy, where it emphasizes dialogue, participation, cultural identity, trust, commitment, ownership, and empowerment, leading to social transformations. It builds upon the broad literature on development communication by various practitioners and scholars. It rejects linear model in favor of cyclical and relational approach, leading to mutual change. So maybe we can assume that it uses transactional models and systems models. So this model sees communities as a multi-level entity. It's not just, unlike the very first model where communication is placed at the hands of the people in the community. So basically community-based or local. This one, it encompasses the local level of community. It includes national and even international levels. So with various interests in social strata. So the definition of community in this model is much more wider. It can, for example, it can include LGBT, or it can include. So it acknowledges the role of power, conflict negotiation, and mediation in overcoming differences within communities. So IMCFSC identified 4 types of change processes. So there is the externally generated change, there is the individual behavior change, the social influence for individual behavior change, and the community dialogue and collective action. Of course, this model focuses on the last one, community dialogue and collective action, as a change process. Now, it starts with a catalyst or a stimulus. So for the first model, they identify a local champion in the case of the amplifying voices. For this model, they identify a catalyst or a stimulus. Now, they identified 6 potential catalysts when you are in order to start or to initiate change within a community. It can be an internal stimulus. It can be a change agent. Maybe internal stimulus can be something inside the community, or maybe a local champion, right? Change agent can be an outsider, such as in the case of the UNDP. You need a mediator, a development communicator, or a development worker to be an agent of change, or maybe many others. We have innovation. Policies can also be a potential catalyst, availability of technology, or mass media. So here in the right, you will see an overall a diagram of how they integrate these different functions, different features towards societal impact. So they have the catalyst here, which goes on to engage in community dialogue. They look for conflict and disagreement, and after upon talking about this community dialogue, they reach collective action, eventually leading to both individual and social change. There. Now they include 6 steps, or no, rather 10 steps of community dialogue. So they start by recognizing a problem. They identify and involve leaders and stakeholders. They clarify perceptions, express individual and shared needs. They envision the future. They assess the current status. They now set objectives based on the vision and comparing it with the current status. They look for options for action. They agree on an action, and they come up with an action plan. As for the 5 key action steps in collective action, so here, first they assign responsibilities, they mobilize organizations, they implement, they work on outcomes, and they evaluate in a participatory manner. Now, there are external constraints and support here. The factors outside the community's control, such as poverty or geographic challenges, they can influence the effectiveness of dialogue and collective action, especially when you are engaging with an international or a community that is inclusive of different economic strata, different interests, or socioeconomic strata. Because definitely the disagreement would be much more wider. There would be a bigger gap. So just to summarize, we have discussed different models, different approaches, and we have also discussed the different C4D approaches that are used by the social change. We can see that we look back on the similarity. Again, we're just going to go back to the similarities. They also, for social impact, they also engage the community, mostly work with the communities. They also use strategic communication. They are also focus on the audience. They consider the target, the needs, or the preference, how they're going to communicate with the audience, and they're also participatory in nature. Maybe the differences, they're also different in the focus and objective. The target audience is also different. In the scope is also different. Like for example, the amplifying voices is much more local than the last one, IMCFSC, which is can be international in scope. Methods and techniques are also different, and the implementation process is also they're also different from one another. So I hope that my report was able to shed light, and I hope that I was able to share few insights on the communication for development. So here are my references, and thank you very much.